welcome back to the show. I am super excited for my guest here today. I have James Berry, who is the founder of Pluck organ-based seasoning. So we're going to have an amazing conversation today all about organ meats. And I also want to know how in the world you ended up getting into this. I can probably assume, but I want to know your story. So fill us all in as to how you ended up deciding to do this product.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Lisa. It's such a pleasure. So I've been a chef for over 16 years. I started loving food at like 7. I became a professional chef and I think I was in my 30s. It was like 2004. But my pursuit of food and how I cook and why I cook is really about how do I help people get healthy? And because I recognize that we all just kind of gravitate towards our addictive like qualities, like towards sweets, towards comfort foods. And the majority of those things are just not healthy. So I've been really kind of on that search. And I think it was becoming a father that inspired me to really continue to think, how can I get nutrient dense foods into my daughters or into my family? And really it starts with, well, you got to identify what is a nutrient dense food. And of course, I think you can identify, it's like, you look at the way people market what's nutrient dense, that's not necessarily nutrient dense.
So true.
Right? It's like, yeah. I call that the illusion of health. It's like, it's so important. I always tell people, like, when you're at the grocery store, don't fall asleep at the cart. Because if you fall asleep at the cart, what happens is you look at the front of the label of the product, and that says something and then emphasizes something. It's marketing. They don't legally have to tell you what's on the product on the front. The front is all about marketing, catching your eye. The back is the legal part. The back is where they have to actually identify what this is, the truth of what's in it. And so I'm always just about, like, how do you first, let's identify what the nutrient dense foods are, and then how do we easily get it into the diet? And at one point, now I did not grow up eating organ meats. So right. It's not like I come from this, hearth, like this farm, I grew up on a farm and we ate like, the Weston A. Price style, my entire life. It's like, I came to this later. I came to this from culinary school. And so for me, it's about, okay, well, how do I get this whole food into my diet, but easily and in a way that doesn't require a new habit? Because, I think when we require new habits, we fail or it doesn't stick. And I want health to stick. I want it to be sustainable, not just this, fad. And so I identified organ meats. Organ meats are Mother Nature's multivitamin. They're the most nutrient dense food on the planet. It's bioavailable. It's easily absorbed. And I was like, okay, organ meats, but no one's eating them.
Right.
No one's eating them. No one knows how to cook them. No one knows where to buy them. You know what I mean? Like, no one knows how to source them. And so it's like, so how do I do this? And then it was like, okay, well, organ meat supplements already exist. And I know they're getting the quality of those. They're mostly coming from New Zealand, which is a really clean sources. I was like, well, why can't I just get that and then add spices and herbs to it to make it taste better? And that's awesome. Kind of where it all came. And I'm happy to report that I think I've succeeded. I mean, we launched in January of last year and the feedback has been phenomenal. I mean, people are saying like, oh my gosh, I don't get a gag reflex when I eat. I usually get a gag reflex when I eat organs. I don't get that with your product. My kids love it. I'm putting it in all my food. I feel great, so I think we've succeeded.
I love it. And I think I see it so often with parents. It is. And like you had just said, you wanted to figure out how to get nutrient dense food for your kids. Yeah. And, I saw it with my sister when all of a sudden she realized I'm growing a baby. What toxins am I exposed to on a daily basis that I kind of dealt with? And then all of a sudden it cleans it up, right? Like that's that turning point is when we've got little people that we're figuring that stuff out for. Absolutely. And I love that you've made it simple because that's the whole thing about our podcast here is how to make healthy living simple. Because when we go in, because I've seen it for 20 years in my practice, where patients will walk in and say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and ABC and all of this, and I'm going to do it next week. And they fail at it all. And then they come back and they're like, I tried that once, hey, I tried organ meats. I can't do that. Like, no, you've made it simple. You've made it sustainable. So let's really, I told you right before we hit record, I've been using a supplement line in my practice for the 20 years that I've been in practice. It's been around for, it was actually the world's first multivitamin, but it literally has bovine organs in it. And it has been this explanation for the last 20 years of my practice as to why we're giving them a multivitamin with a bunch of organ meats, and people would just freak out. But this is the best time period now, because with carnivore, with everything else, everybody understands the importance of organ meats. But if we don't, let's just go back to the basics. Let's talk what are you considering organ meats?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, because we assume organ meats is like the liver, the kidney, the heart. Those are the three common answers to organ meats. But organ meats, we need to remember, organ meats, the other name is offal, which is, not the best name, but it refers, so it's OFFAL, and it refers to, they think the name came from when you're butchering an animal, it's the parts of the animal that are falling off. So that's where they think offal comes from. And really what offal is it's ultimately everything in the animal except the muscle meat and the bone. So bone marrow is offal, but not bone.
Oh.
And if you think about it, so offal can mean like, so I mentioned liver, kidney, heart, those are the common ones, but the less common that people are not eating as much, because I think it's also an issue of sourcing, but you have the spleen, the lungs, the testicles, the ovaries, the brain. Brain is supposedly amazing, but so hard to get. The thymus and pancreas, which are known as sweetbreads, bone marrow, as I mentioned, tongue, lips, ears, skin, tail, blood. The blood shows up in other countries. It shows up in like, Ireland in the blood sausage, or what they call black pudding. Stomach lining is known as tripe. So whenever you hear someone say, oh, I put tripe in this, that's stomach lining. Feet, chicken feet, or if you ever make bone broth, chicken feet are amazing for bone broth. Another name that you hear for pig feet is trotters. And then intestines. And intestines actually show up in Southern food. If anyone's ever had chitlins, they use the pig intestine for chitlins, which is actually really interesting, because organ meats have quite the history. If you think about it, our ancestors ate it. And when I say ancestors, people immediately think I'm talking about our Paleolithic ancestors. No, I'm talking about our grandparents.
Yes.
Our parents, depending on our age. Like, I'm not talking that long ago. And they ate it. I know I talked to my mom, and she says, oh yeah, we had liver and onions constantly, and I loved it. And I remember she would tell me, she grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and when they went to get like a chicken, they would go to the poultry shop, and the chickens would be alive. And they would literally pick out which one they want, and then come back an hour or two later, and it would be a warm carcass. They had just plucked it, killed it, everything right then and there. And I was like, oh my God, they were so much more in touch. And this is not, she's like 76, so she's not that old, you know what I mean? So it's like just that far back. And they were already still so much more in touch with where did their food come from. Now we just, it's at an arm's distance, it's covered in plastic or something, and you don't really know, well, what part of the animal is this, or what am I eating, or even like the whole, like just focusing on chicken, the whole carcass is rarely even bought nowadays. It's pieces of it, and then it's skinned and deboned, and it's just, so it's not really, you're not connecting what this is. And so I think it's interesting, because in America, we are not eating organ meats the way the rest of the country or world is. And we're also, something like 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient, but yet we're not calorie deficient, right?
No, absolutely not.
We have an obesity epidemic.
Yeah.
Right? What I mean? So we're eating food, but we're not getting calorie rich food. And that says everything to me.
Absolutely.
Everything.
And I think that so much, I don't know when you grew up, but I'm a kid of the 80s, right? And I remember my mom like cooking liver, and it's that smell. Like, you know, like when you're cooking it was that instantaneous, like, oh my gosh, I know mom has liver on for tonight and I just don't want that. But that wasn't, I mean, I'm going to date myself, but that wasn't that long ago. I don't feel like, but so we know like 70s and 80s we were doing it. And then I'm trying to figure out like, why did we as America go so far astray? But think of what happened in the 90s was that low fat diet, right? Like that's, we can go into the food guide pyramid and all that,
cholesterol,
but
right?
right, low
Cholesterol.
cholesterol, we can't do those things. But
Yeah.
it's I even think of, you know, I'm Polish. And so my parents and my grandparents would always make Polish kielbasa, and that casing, right? That's
Yeah.
intestine. So
Yeah.
I would always be like, this is so, why do we have to do this?
Oh, Scotland's got haggis, which
Oh
is
gosh.
sheep, calf heart, sheep
Mhm.
or calf heart, liver and lungs mixed together with suet and oatmeal, and then another seasoning, and it's boiled in the stomach of the animal. I mean, it's like every Mexico has menudo, which is beef stomach. I mean, you know, every other country's got something. And I was mentioning chitlins. So chitlins is interesting because back in the day, it's really a slave food, because back in the day, the plantation owners would slaughter a hog, and they would keep the muscle meat, the best part of the, you know, I'm putting quotation marks in the air as though the muscle meat's the best part, but actually historically it's not, but they would say it's the best part. And then they would give the slaves the intestines and the parts of the animal that they didn't want to eat. And that's where chitlins comes from. So I really do believe, actually, to a degree, that we lost favor with organ meats because of the economy and socioeconomic bigotry and whatnot, all these different things. Because basically people, when after World War II, you had a lot of families. Now you had two people in the household working. So before World War II, it was mostly just the male person working. Then during World War II, when the male was in the war, women started working. It was huge liberation for women. And so then when they came back, the women were like, I don't want to stop working. Well, good for them, which is they should have been working way before that. But now you have two people in the household working. You have, for most households, you have more income coming in. So it was like, oh, well, we're making more money. We deserve the more expensive cuts of the animal. But no one was connecting that to nutrition. It was more about the price. Like, oh, we deserve this. We can now afford this. And so we're going to step into this. And the reality is anyone wanting to save money, buy organs. They're cheaper.
Right.
They're cheaper than muscle meat, and they're better for you.
And especially back in the day, I mean, they always said, you know, it's like the heart to help heal the heart. It's the adrenals to help heal the adrenals.
Like
right. And
supports like.
so, yes.
Like supports like. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense if you think about it, like, because organs are designed to support so a lot of people think like the liver and the kidney we all know that they're filtrations, they're filter systems, but they think that that's where the toxins store. And that's actually not, they're not designed to store toxins. They're designed to break down toxins so that the toxins can leave your body. So they support the toxins to becoming water soluble so they can leave through your pee, your poop, or your sweat, right? Because those are our detoxification pathways. And of course, in an unhealthy animal, and human too, when I say animal, humans are animals, right? So in an unhealthy human or animal, then that detoxification pathways aren't as open. And so, yes, that is where you want to really think about quality, because then in those circumstances, in an unhealthy person, the organ, the liver, whatever organ it is, liver, kidney, that may not be working properly. But normally toxins are stored in fat or they leave your body. And so if you think about it, the organ has all those nutrients and vitamins because it is designed to change, to get those toxins out of your body. So it has this plethora of nutrients to do that. And so it makes sense that those nutrients, if you eat a liver, it's going to support your liver because it has the nutrients that your liver has as well. Same with the heart. Coenzyme Q10 is in the heart. It's the one organ that has that. And that's also what, that's in bovine, that's in sheep, that's, it's in other animals, and it's in us. So you eat that heart, it's probably going to support your heart. So I love that. The exchange of energy, the like supports like, it's an ancestral concept, but I think we have to admit that, our modern times we're now realizing, like when you look at agricultural systems, that the regenerative agriculture, for example, is more conducive towards a healthy planet than what we've been doing. Well, guess who did regenerative agriculture? Native Americans. We decimated that culture. We decimated those people, but yet we're now learning that actually these ancestral ways are the way we should have been doing it. And if
Yes.
we don't go back to those, we could end up destroying our society.
Oh, absolutely. Look at what's happening with the bees and everything else right now, and what's gonna,
Oh,
like, it is. It's one of those things I think we need to realize, where people oftentimes will look at somebody like you and me and how we're eating and all of that, and they're like, oh, it's so high maintenance, or it's so much to do, but it really isn't. And so, like you said, you've made it simple, but it's also, this is so sustainable, and it's something we need to do, just not to, for our own,
for the
like,
planet.
yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
We have
So,
to, and I really do want to connect to, like, I mentioned the deficiency that's going on, the 92%, that's just what they've measured, right? And anytime there's any number out there, you need to know that it's higher than, because whenever they do these, they only measure like 1,000 people or whatever it is. And then they take that and they apply it to entire society, and they assume that that's got to be 92%. But you have to assume that it's always going to be higher than whatever they say. So my guess is actually it's probably more like 99.9% of people in America are nutrient deficient. And I correlate that with, well, okay, we're not eating nose to tail. And yet our ancestors did. And so I have to connect that, like, it's not about finding a new magic pill. It's not about figuring out in the laboratory how to isolate something to then get it in our diet. I really do believe it's about, no, we got to go back to these ancestral foods, whole foods, where they're properly raised, they're humanely treated, the conditions are conducive towards health. Get back to eating that nose to tail, that variety, the variety of that animal, and move away from this kind of like very structured, very bland, very one way of
the very
looking at an
nutrient
animal.
void, like everything out of a box or a can is like literally just hardly any nutrients. It's sustenance is all it is.
Yeah.
So
and it's not working. It's not working.
No, it's not working. We're the fattest we've ever been as a country. We're the sickest we've ever been, right? We're on the most meds in the whole world, but we've got a supposedly world-class healthcare system. It's so, there's so much. I say it all the time on this podcast, is we've got to follow the money. And obviously, I'm a chiropractor, right? So I have figured this one out a long time ago. There is no money in healthy people. They will pay for, a $500,000 back surgery over $50 to the chiropractor. So anyways, whole nother story. Let's talk about the sourcing of animals, because like you had just said, and I'm even that person that I've said it in the past. Like I remember waitressing at the country club years ago, and they were eating, all had liver, and they're like, oh, this is so great. Don't you want some? And I was like, I know what the liver does, but this is also coming from a conventional cow. So I was like, not up for it. However, like you had just said, if it's a healthy animal, so what are your qualities for a healthy animal? What is something that we're looking for?
Yeah. So I would say, the qualities are the animal that's aligned with nature. So animals are ruminant, they're herbivores, they're ruminant animals. They will eat grass, and they eat agriculture. Like they use land that actually is not really conducive towards growing monocrops or anything like that. So animals really, when you look at a regenerative farm, I mean, the animal is a part of the process. They are contributing to the entire whole. And they have to be grass fed to do that. And one myth is that people don't realize is that all cows, because when we say bovine, we're saying cow, that refers to a cow, but all cows are grass fed. They're just not all grass finished. So it's really important that you distinguish when you're looking for that quality of grass fed and grass finished. Pastured doesn't necessarily mean. So there's a few different terms, and none of them are regulated. So there's grass-fed, there's then grass-fed, grass-finished, which is 100% grass-fed, and then there's pastured. So a cow can be grass-fed, but not necessarily on a pasture. So pasture refers to they're not, enclosed, that they're allowed to roam to eat. And so you really want to look for all of those qualities. But here's the thing that I have been given some thought to. Is if you look at the rest of the world, like China, for example, China eats an amazing amount of organ meats. And if you ever go to like an Asian market, it's not necessarily, you don't go there and go like, oh, this is grass fed. It's not like they don't put an emphasis on that quality or how the animal is being raised or what it's being fed, but they do put an emphasis on eating nose to tail. And so it makes me wonder if so much of the world is, and Mexico is also one that eats very much nose to tail, but so much of the rest of the world is putting more focus on just eating nose to tail and less on the quality. While I do support the quality of what we're talking about, I sometimes now wonder, is getting the organ more important than the quality? So, and what I mean by that is, China has got a huge population, much larger than us. And for the most part, they're a lot healthier than us, right? And they're eating nose to tail, not focusing on the quality. We're not eating nose to tail. And sometimes when we only focus on the quality, then we're limiting the amount of people that can eat it, because it can be so expensive. It can be hard to find, you know what I mean? So I'm more and more trying to kind of put out that message of like, yes, okay, if you have a choice, look for this quality. Yeah. But if you don't have a choice, and the choice is I either eat an organ or I don't, I say eat the organ. And that's, I know that that's not necessarily popular opinion, but I think it's similar to fish. You know, you remember when fish was kind of becoming a focused product, and it was like, oh, the mercury in the fish, and it became like, oh, everyone's stopping eating fish. It's like, no. And then they were like, no, eating fish is important. So if you're concerned about mercury, it's better to get the fish in than to not eat it. And I say the same thing with organs personally.
And I'm curious, this is, as you said this, I'm wondering, we know obviously in the United States, we're pumping our cows full of estrogen, right? And growth hormone and everything else.
And antibiotics. Yeah.
Right. And I know it's not practiced in a lot of countries overseas. I'm curious, like I don't know anything about China. So I'm curious if they do that or not. And so if it's not there either, like, I think that's a big component of it. When we have the antibiotics, the growth hormones, the estrogens, they're going to plump up. They're going to get big. They're being fed, corn to be big. And then they're storing all those toxins in their fat. So, maybe that's also a part of it, is they might be doing all their nose to tail, but they're also not pumping their animals full of a bunch of other stuff.
It's totally possible. And I don't know how they raise their animals either. I do know certain countries like Switzerland, they're so clean. They raise their animals so clean, right? So certain countries really do have a much better method. I'm just not sure about China, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's very possible that they have different regulations than us, but my biggest concern with health in general is I never want health to be a wealthy person's option. Like I'm kind of on a mission to make sure that we really make health obtainable for everyone, because it shouldn't be based on your wallet, and the other question, ultimately I think we all have to ask is, once again, what is healthy? I mean, I think we get on these trends, these diets, and maybe you'll identify with this, but like, I've been in the field, as I mentioned, for over 16 years. And I started as a private chef. And so my job was to understand what were the diets out there and how do I cook for these diets and do it really well? Because I was getting, I was working for celebrities. I was working for tons of people, and they were all just following whatever the trend of the diet was. When I first started, the trending diet was the fat flush diet. Okay. So I had to learn everything. I had to learn all of it. And I would be a guinea pig on myself. I think I did the master cleanse. I mean, I had to understand all these different things. And what ultimately I came to is that one, that's why I focus on whole foods, because whole foods aren't a trend. But two, I quickly realized that that basically, gosh, I kind of just lost my thought with it. Sorry, but I just quickly learned to identify like that a lot. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So I quickly learned to identify that a lot of these trends are just simply trends. So like now we have like keto is really popular, right? And what happens when these diets come out? What's the very first products that just get blown out, like that get hit the market?
Right. They start doing all like, and this is because I'm a huge keto person. However, I'm always that person that says, I don't want all the ketoized foods, right?
Yeah, like it's the desserts. It's desserts. It's always like these new diets, whenever they hit the market, is the very first thing that gets pumped out to everybody. It was like, how can you still get your addictive foods, but within the confines of this diet?
Right.
To me, that's just like, it's just not a solution. It's
I
just like, we're
agree.
just continuing to pass. It's kind of like the way we keep having the same conversation about abortions and versus life and or whatever else of certain voting rights, you know, these same conversations. It's like, no, this is not, a woman's body is her body. You know what I mean? Stop these discussions. Yes, we don't want to have abortion, but you still deserve the right to choose. It's your body. You know what I mean? There's certain discussions that just should not be on the table anymore. And I believe it's the same as around diets. Like, why are we still trying to fit sugary items, even though they're 0 calorie, into our diets? And so I just, I know I'm kind of going off topic, but I look at trends and I just see, that's the kind of stuff I see, is that it's this false portrayal of what healthy is.
And the fact is we need to be able to get the sugar out of our diet because it's an addictive substance. And so the fact is, we are constantly, you know, getting the paleo treat or the keto treat or whatever it is, we're never getting the sugar out of the diet or the sweetness out of our diet. And therefore we're always constantly craving it. And we're in that horrible cycle that we just can't ever get out of. So it is going back to nature, going back as, you know, I'm a very much like, let's look at how our ancestors lived. Were they in keto all the time? No, they were not in ketosis all the time. It was an adaptive state. So they go in and out. And so that's what I'm a huge fan of, cyclical keto and all sorts of stuff like that. But here's the deal. If somebody is listening to this and they're like, okay, I get it now. Most nutrient dense part of the animal, I probably need to start incorporating organ meats. How do I do this?
Yeah.
I know you've got a way to kind of stage into easing into
yes.
organ meats.
So I should probably finish. So the sourcing is, we talked about the 100% grass-fed, the pastured, but then where do you find that? And the reality is that feeds into the easing in. So you can definitely do a search online. There's US Wellness Meats sells them. I mean, there's so many. You do any search, just do a search for, you know, 100% grass-fed organ meats or beef organ meats if you want, and tons of options will come up. Most of them will ship out. You can also go to your local market and see, of course, farmers markets are a great option as well. Just talk to the farmer. A lot of times they don't bring the organs, all the organs to the market because they don't think they'll sell. But if you talk to them and say, hey, can I get the tongue? Can I get this? Can I get that? They'll be able to sell it to you. And most likely they'd be happy to sell it to you. But when you're easing into organs, Pluck is actually the gateway. Like Pluck, the organ-based seasoning that I created, it has 5 organs. It has liver, kidney, heart, spleen, and pancreas. And it tastes good, and you don't need to know how to cook. You can put it on your to-go food if you're eating out, right? You can literally sprinkle it on anything, and it ups the nutrition of that thing. And now you're getting micro dosing of organ meats with frequent use equals the cumulative effect. So it's just a gateway. You can hide it in food, whatever. It doesn't matter. No one even needs to know what it is. You can just sprinkle it on things like salt and pepper.
An easy way for the kids.
Yeah, totally. So that, to me, that's the gateway of getting organ meats. Because now you're starting to change your palate because Pluck has got an umami, because organ meats have umami. And so it's starting to shift your palate and get you open and then trying organ meats. So gateway, Pluck. And then next step is, I would advise you buy a beef liver. But when you get that beef liver, it usually comes frozen. Keep it frozen. And here's what you do. Then you take that beef liver out, and let's say you're making some spaghetti sauce, or hamburgers, anything with ground meat. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be beef. It could be lamb. It could even be turkey. It doesn't matter. Then just take your grater and grate that frozen liver. Grate like a tablespoon in it first, and then up it to another tablespoon, and keep it at like about 20 to 25% of whatever the ground mix is. So if you have a pound of ground meat, that's about 1/4 of a cup of grated beef liver. So I find that if you go beyond that, it's the taste starts to come through, the texture changes. So our goal when you're easing into organ meats is to not have that happen. We don't want the taste to come through, and we don't want the texture change, because we don't want anyone to know. We don't want to, we don't want you to feel like you're sacrificing anything by getting organ meats into your diet. So that's step 2. Step 3 is, well, I should add with step 2, there are some already pre-ground meat combos, like Force of Nature has a ancestral blend that already has liver and heart in it. So you can find those as well. And that can sometimes be in the freezer aisle of your market. And that's called Force of Nature. But step 3 then would be, okay, you're now starting to get the taste for these organ meats, but now try it where it's not the main thing of the meal, but where you're incorporating it. So what I recommend is you then step into doing like beef tongue, or even chicken hearts. Like you try an organ, but you're not keeping it in that shape. So what happens is when you cook a tongue, for example, you cook the tongue no different than you would like braise a meat. It's very identical. You could put it in your pressure cooker or your slow cooker, put it with some seasoning, add a little liquid, and it's like it just cooks just like any braised meat. But what happens is that tongue's got a sheath on it, and it kind of starts to peel off after you've cooked it for about an hour. But you take out that sheath, and what's underneath is this meat that is extremely close to muscle meat. It really is basically a muscle. And you can then take that out, stick it in your oven under the broiler, crisp it up, put some seasonings on it, crisp it up, and then it shreds just like carnitas, and then make beef tongue tacos. And so, and to my point is, you don't really think about the fact I'm eating tongue. You're just like, oh, it looks like shredded beef.
Yeah.
And you can do the same with chicken hearts, not in terms of the cooking, but what you can do is chop them up really small and stick them into the dish, and it will look like you have little mushrooms in it or something, diced mushrooms. And you won't think I'm eating heart, but chicken hearts are so mild and they take on the flavor of whatever you're using. So they're just an easy organ to assimilate. And the heart, as I said, is closer to muscle meat. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of like 3 steps to ease in. And then, next step would be, okay, now front and center, take the organ and make it front and center, have like a liver and onions dish or something like that. But the easing in will help to adapt your palate and your sensibility, because we have to remember we're emotional eaters. We're all, food and psychology are hand in hand. So you got to think about the fact that, okay, we're not only deterred by the taste, but we're also deterred by touching it and the look of it and the texture of it. So any way that you can ease into all 3 of those, the taste, the look, the texture, is going to support your psychology around the food.
I love it. Those are so simple. I think I have a funny story you'll probably laugh with this, maybe not, or just some of our listeners might be grossed out by it. On Facebook, I'm watching, because my friends are like, we're all crunchy, holistic people. And so one of the girls is like trying to figure out how to get beef liver into my kids' smoothies. So literally did a slice of raw beef liver, threw it in the smoothie. She's like, kids didn't tell, couldn't tell. So she's like, so I upped it the next day, still couldn't tell. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh,
at one point
those kids knew what was in that smoothie right now. But I know so many of us have done that with our kids, where it's like, well, maybe they won't know some spinach is in here, but raw beef liver, I had to laugh.
No, I mean, that's true. It's like there is a ratio, and that's kind of what it meant. For me, I discovered it was around 20-25%, but there really is a ratio. You can do up to a certain amount, no one will even know. And I'm all about like, any organ is better than no organ. That's my whole philosophy. It's just, we are missing these foods from our diet. They're incredibly nutrient rich, but what's also really key about that is they are bioavailable, and we cannot lose sight of that, because all these packaged foods have synthetic vitamins. A lot of times it's not measured how much, so you don't know how much your body's getting, how much it's not getting. A lot of them are not even absorbable in your body, so they just get peed out. I mean, we're kind of being fooled into thinking we're getting these nutrient rich foods, and they're not at all.
I agree. And this is where I always tell my patients, because we use Standard Process, right? And so it's coming from a farm in Wisconsin, and then it's a bunch of cows.
Standard Process is a great brand. Yeah,
I love them. But the B vitamins, they're like, but my patients would be like, what, my urine's not bright yellow. I'm like, yeah, you need to realize that bright yellow is a byproduct of coal tar. And do you think your body knows what to do with that? So I'm like, versus you think of the nutrients you can actually get, like the B vitamins that are found in the organ meats. So
they're off the charts. I mean, B12, of course, being one of the most dominant, but if you think about it, you mentioned, your pregnant mamas, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you look at prenatals, so science is telling us to use prenatals when you're trying to get pregnant and when you are pregnant, right? Well, what's in a prenatal? Oh, it's vitamin B, it's vitamin A, it's vitamin B, it's folate, it's all, the list goes on, it's all the different, C, D, E, K, iron, calcium, copper, magnesium, all these things, right? But folate being a very big important one. And if you look at what's in a prenatal and then you look at what's in organ meats, it's like, oh wait, organ meat has all of it plus more. So it's like, isn't that interesting that the thing science is saying is going to help you create life is already in organ meats?
And it only makes sense, right? Like
Right.
we're here trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's like, wait a minute, like I think whoever created us actually knew what they were doing. And the other thing that I want to make a comment, because so often now we hear the MTHFR defects so much, and that has to do with the folate and folic acid. And if our bodies, because so many of us have this genetic defect and we can't synthesize that or not, or break it down properly. So unfortunately, when women are loading up on some of those, it can't be so beneficial if they happen to have one of the MTHFR genes. So it's going to be so much easier to get the nutrients from an actual whole food source because your body knows what to do with that versus the coal tar, right? That I had just said. So especially when you just said that about the prenatals, I'm like, oh, this is a big one because we up our vitamins a ton when we're pregnant, ladies, right? And if we have not tested for an MTHFR defect, we've had people on the podcast where they've talked about this, where the woman continued to miscarry and couldn't figure out why. And it was because of all of these excess, the B vitamins they were doing that they couldn't methylate. They couldn't break down. So,
yeah, I imagine then the question comes up is like, okay, if you're eating organs, should you be taking a prenatal? And what do you usually tell your,
if we're going to do something like that, we're going to be doing a whole food prenatal, and you know what I mean? And I look at standard process. They don't have a straight up prenatal, but we're going to look at individual. Catalin was the world's first multivitamin, right? Like we can go through all of that. And so often I have a conversation all the time where people are saying, but on the side, it's not saying like, the 1000% of the RDA value. And I'm like, right. But again, when it's synthesized in a lab, when it's made in a lab, we can have those numbers. When you're grabbing it from the farm, it's not going to be that high, but your body knows what to do with it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's such an important distinction because, you hear a lot when people talk about beef livers, the fear of getting too much vitamin A, for example.
Yeah.
And that is the important distinction is when it's coming from a whole food source, your body can either assimilate it or get rid of it. It can process it. It knows what to do with it. It's when it's synthetic, your body doesn't know what to do with it.
Has no idea.
And you can enter into a danger zone and of getting too much. So it's a non-issue when you eat it, you get it from a whole food source.
And I really think like how much liver would you have to eat to get to that point? Because people are typically so deficient anymore. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're going to be eating liver 3 times a day for the next 30 years. Like maybe then we're going to be looking at it that way. So I think, I 100% agree with you.
I find that, our skills of intuitive eating are real. Like we do innately have the ability to intuitively eat. We've just lost touch with it. But similar to when you lick salt, like sea salt, for example, you can test this theory, which is you take some of the salt, your body starts going, oh, I want this. But then at one point it says, no, I'm done. And it's so clear. At one point you cannot do any more salt. It's like it will taste bad.
Right.
And the same thing happens with organ meats. If you start eating liver and it's like your body's like, oh, this is so good, I want more and more and more. Your body will tell you, you're good. You're good. You don't need any more.
That's exactly it. Like the Element electrolyte packs that I use, there's a day I'll be like, okay, 1, I'm fine. The next day I'm like, I think I need more. And then you reach that point halfway through your drink. You're like, all right, this is salt. I am done. But it's intuitive that way. And I like how you said that because oftentimes I hate when people are like, I intuitive eat. I wanted an Oreo today. And I'm like, no, that's just stupid.
No, that's emotional. Yeah. That's
an addiction.
A lot of times. Yeah, that's addiction or like you're probably deficient in something and you're just craving sugar because you're not getting enough fat. There's something else, but totally.
Right.
Or it's marketing influence, it's psychosis. I mean, there's so many different things it could be. When you're craving something that's not found in nature, then there's something else going on.
I agree. 100%. Parasites, candida, all sorts of stuff. Right?
Totally. It could be so many things. Yeah.
All right, James, tell them where they can find you. And I know we have a coupon code for them too, but
so Pluck is available at eatpluck.com. And I'm sure you'll post
we'll put the coupon code. It was Dr. Lisa O.
Yeah, excellent. And give it a try. What's really cool about Pluck is it's extremely versatile. So even though it's coming from a cow source, bovine source, you can put it on everything. I mean, we put it on fish. I tried it on oysters and it's like amazing. Popcorn, my kids love it on popcorn. If you eat popcorn, rice, people tell me it's great. Potatoes, it's so good on. I mean, like it's just endless. because it's really about that umami. It's like you really don't, you want to almost not think about it as an animal product. It's more of an umami product. And umami is really it's the fifth taste. So we have sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. And umami is that fifth one. And what umami does, it's kind of it's savory, it's kind of meaty, but it makes the other four unique tastes even better. So it actually, when you put Pluck on other foods, it actually makes the food taste better. So you'll just be prepared if you start using it, that you may start getting lots of compliments on your cooking. If you want those, use it.
Awesome. I love it. And this is the best way to like help all of our diets improve, and especially our children.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for pushing organ meats. I so appreciate what you do.
Absolutely.